What happens when a Hollywood royal walks onto a late-night stage expecting to be treated like actual royalty? What happens when one of the most powerful comedic voices in American television is asked, no, told, to curtsy on command? And what happens when the Duchess of Sussex miscalculates the boundaries of fame, power, and respect, live on national television? This isn't just another Meghan Markle headline. This is the moment the curtain dropped, quite literally, on a behind-the-scenes debacle so surreal, so loaded with irony, that it left insiders asking, has she finally lost the plot? It started off like any other star-studded media appearance. Booking agents talking, producers planning, stylists texting back and forth about lighting angles and wardrobe colors. Meghan Markle was set to appear on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. A big deal, especially after months of calculated absence from the Hollywood talk show circuit. With her Archwell ventures wobbling, her Spotify dreams dead, and Netflix reportedly tightening the leash, Meghan needed a win. And she needed it fast. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But this time, the victory she craved became the very humiliation she couldn't escape. Because when Meghan entered the iconic Studio 6B, she didn't just walk in with glam squads and advisors. She allegedly brought something else with her, a demand. A shocking, royal-level expectation that had never been made before on American television. According to sources close to the production, Meghan Markle's team reached out to Fallon's producers ahead of time and made an eyebrow-raising request. It wasn't about lighting. It wasn't about avoiding certain questions. It wasn't even about editing rights. It was this: Jimmy Fallon, beloved host, veteran comedian, and king of late-night charm, would need to curtsy when Meghan walked on stage. Yes, you heard that correctly. Meghan allegedly wanted Fallon to show her the kind of ceremonial deference typically reserved for monarchs and dignitaries. A full, visible, on-camera curtsy. And that's when everything began to unravel. Now, here's the thing. Hollywood is a world of illusion. Protocols can be bent. Rules are fluid. But even in that flexible universe, there are invisible lines. And Meghan Markle? According to NBC insiders, she sprinted past every one of them. But before we unpack what really happened backstage, the chaos, the confrontation, the ultimate fallout, we need to understand the stakes. Why was Meghan so desperate to control this moment? Why now? Because in the brutal chess game of media relevance, Meghan Markle was losing pieces, fast. Her Spotify contract had crumbled in public fashion. Her relationship with Netflix, once seen as her creative empire's foundation, was allegedly under review. Her Archetypes podcast was off the air. No more curated chats with Serena Williams or mind-mapping monologues about gender dynamics. Meghan had gone quiet. Too quiet. Then came the rumored cooking show, whispers of a wellness brand, failed pitches, rejected scripts. She had vanished from red carpets, award shows, magazine covers. But this silence wasn't strategic. It was survival. Meanwhile, across the pond, Princess Kate was lighting up the headlines. Glowing in royal tiaras, hosting state banquets, charming world leaders. The contrast was brutal. While Kate dazzled in royal gowns, Meghan was being compared to influencers hustling Instagram wellness brands. So when Meghan landed a spot on The Tonight Show, it wasn't just a casual appearance. It was a comeback, a rebranding moment, a media mic drop, or so she thought. But there was one problem. Meghan didn't want to appear as a former royal. She wanted to reclaim the power, reinforce the grandeur. And in her mind, that meant forcing America to see her as royalty. Not metaphorically, not nostalgically, but right here, right now, in a studio under bright lights, with Jimmy Fallon bowing at her feet. And here's where it gets even more surreal. Jimmy Fallon, by all accounts, is one of the most agreeable, easygoing personalities in entertainment. He's worked with A-list stars, real-life politicians, even members of the British monarchy. But even Jimmy has his limits. Producers were stunned. Staffers laughed at first, thinking the curtsy request was a joke. But it wasn't. Meghan's camp doubled down. It's a mark of respect, they allegedly said. You wouldn't ask the Queen to walk on stage unacknowledged. But Jimmy Fallon isn't part of the royal household. He's not on the Buckingham Palace payroll. He's a comedian with a global audience who doesn't take orders from duchesses, real or symbolic. And when Meghan reportedly insisted, that's when the energy shifted. That's when whispers turned into tension. That's when Jimmy allegedly walked away and said the unthinkable. She's not going on. Let that sit for a moment. This was supposed to be Meghan's return to primetime TV. The segment was scheduled, the lighting rehearsed, the applause signs ready to blink. But all of it came to a screeching halt over a single royal request. NBC insiders now claim there was shouting backstage. That Fallon personally told producers he wouldn't be mocked by a demand like that. That he refused to perform a curtsy, even as a joke, because it would set a dangerous precedent, one where fame masquerades as monarchy. And then boom, Meghan was reportedly escorted out. No taping, no interview, no polite cancellation. She left through a back door, furious, silent, and stunned. Social media caught wind hours later. Emergency guest switch on Fallon, one user noted. Another asked, why did Meghan Markle ghost The Tonight Show? But those whispers soon turned into full-blown speculation when crew members began leaking pieces of the puzzle to anonymous entertainment blogs. And what was Meghan's response? Radio silence. No Instagram statements. No PR rebuttal. Just more silence. And then a strange string of spontaneous, Meghan-friendly articles in legacy outlets days later. But the damage was done. Jimmy Fallon had allegedly done what no other American media figure dared. He said no. He rejected the narrative. He pulled the curtain back on the illusion of royalty in exile. Because here's the hard truth. Hollywood might love a duchess, but it worships authenticity. And Meghan's brand? It's become anything but. Now, this story isn't just about one botched talk show appearance. It's about something far deeper. It's about power, perception, and the illusion of control. It's about what happens when someone used to being treated like a queen enters a room where comedy, not coronation, reigns supreme. Because this wasn't just a PR fumble. It was a moment of public reckoning. A surreal, unscripted unraveling of a persona crafted in palace marble and repackaged in California sunshine. And now the world's watching, asking questions. Did Meghan truly believe Fallon would bow? Was this a miscalculation or a meltdown? And most haunting of all, what would she do next to salvage her image? Because Meghan Markle wasn't just humiliated. She was silenced, dismissed, and reportedly blacklisted from returning to the show again. And that's only the beginning. Because what happened after she left the studio? What Fallon allegedly told his producers? What Meghan's team threatened to leak in retaliation? What the palace may have quietly said behind closed doors? That's the part no one saw coming. What kind of celebrity walks out of one of the most powerful TV studios in America, stunned, angry, and humiliated, and then immediately begins plotting her next move? What kind of public figure sees a failed talk show appearance not as a setback, but as a battlefield? And more importantly, what kind of duchess believes she can rewrite the story before the world even knows what happened? Because the moment Meghan Markle stepped out of 30 Rock through that service exit, hair still camera ready, makeup still flawless, mic still clipped to her dress, she wasn't just leaving a studio. She was leaving a war zone she hadn't expected to lose. And the second that door shut behind her, the Meghan Markle media machine activated. But here's the question the world didn't know it needed to ask. Why was Meghan even at Fallon's studio that day? What made this interview so important that she showed up armed with demands, expectations, and a level of royal protocol that made NBC executives laugh out loud before realizing she wasn't joking? To answer that, we have to step back, because this wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't random, and it definitely wasn't spontaneous. This was part of a carefully crafted plan. A secret media blitz, a comeback tour in disguise. And Meghan Markle was determined to control every frame, every headline, every narrative beat along the way. Let's rewind. Picture Meghan in early 2025. Her name wasn't trending. The Netflix deals weren't producing hits. Spotify had already publicly mocked her work ethic. Hollywood producers were quietly whispering about the Meghan problem: high demands, low payoff, unpredictable interviews, conflict with staff. Even the public seemed to be growing tired of the royal card meets Hollywood glam persona. While Princess Kate dazzled in tiaras, state banquets, and world diplomacy, Meghan was struggling to find her next defining moment. So what does someone like Meghan do when she feels the spotlight slipping? She orchestrates a comeback. Not loosely, Not casually, meticulously. Because Meghan Markle doesn't just want attention, she wants control of attention. And a comeback requires two things: visibility and sympathy. Her team knew that any major reentry into mainstream media had to be so powerful, so calculated, so emotionally charged that people couldn't look away. And that's where The Tonight Show came in. Think about it. Jimmy Fallon's show is the perfect playground for rebranding. He's charming. He's silly. He's disarming. He makes every celebrity look funnier, more relatable, more lovable. If Meghan wanted to remind America that she wasn't the villain in the story, Fallon was her lifeline. So her team began building the strategy months earlier. Quietly, carefully, secretly. No Instagram teasers. No leaks to Page 6. No obvious PR pushes. No forced pap walks at farmers markets. This time, the approach was stealth. Because Meghan wanted to surprise the world. She wanted the Meghan Markle comeback to hit like a bomb. Imagine the planning meetings behind the scenes. Meghan's PR advisors sitting around glossy conference tables in Beverly Hills, analyzing data charts on declining public interest. Strategists pointing at viral trends. Consultants studying Kate's rising popularity and Meghan's decreasing relevance. Meghan needs a relatability moment, one might have said. She needs humor, another suggested. She needs a late-night appearance, someone else insisted. And then it clicked. Late-night TV. Not a royal interview. Not a documentary. Not a podcast where Meghan controls the narrative from start to finish. A late-night interview. A format she couldn't overscript. A format people trust to reveal a celebrity's real personality. And Meghan believed this was her moment. A chance to reintroduce herself as effortlessly charming. Smart. Fun. Lighthearted. Even humble. But in Meghan Markle's world, there's always a twist. Because while she wanted to look humble on camera, she didn't want to feel humble backstage. And that's where the whole thing unraveled. But before we get there, let's examine the strategy behind Meghan's secret media blitz. Because this chapter of the story, it reveals everything about her mindset. The Fallon appearance wasn't meant to stand alone. It was supposed to be the first domino in a long line of coordinated media visibility moves. A soft reboot of her public image. Think of how major celebrities plan comeback arcs. Beyoncé drops a surprise album. Ben Affleck does the viral Dunkin' ad. Jennifer Coolidge lands the White Lotus and becomes America's sweetheart overnight. Meghan wanted that kind of pivot. But the problem was, Meghan Markle doesn't have Beyoncé-level mystique. She doesn't have Ben Affleck's cultural longevity. And she certainly doesn't have Jennifer Coolidge's universally beloved authenticity. She had something else. Controversy. And controversy can be powerful if you know how to handle it. But Meghan had never mastered the handling. She mastered the manufacturing, the framing, the dramatizing, but not the aftermath. So she planned the Fallon interview as the softest, safest possible reentry point. A smiling Meghan, a laughing Meghan, a Meghan who claps along to Jimmy's silly games, a Meghan who tells adorable anecdotes about her kids, a Meghan who gently shades the royal family without sounding bitter. It was supposed to be perfect. But something unexpected happened during the planning stages. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was pressure. Maybe it was ego. Or maybe it was the simple, uncomfortable truth Meghan refuses to confront. She wants royal treatment without the royal responsibilities. And that's when her team allegedly introduced the idea of a protocol acknowledgement. At first, it was subtle. Meghan would appreciate a warm, respectful introduction, they reportedly said. Then it became specific. Meghan would love a dignified entrance, something symbolic. And then it escalated. We would like Jimmy to curtsy to her, an American comedian, in an American studio, on an American show, curtsying to an American-born actress. You can almost imagine the producer's reaction, the stunned silence, the awkward laughter, the wait, they're serious, confusion. And here's where the contradiction becomes fascinating. Meghan wants to be seen as a strong feminist icon. Yet she demanded a medieval gesture of deference. She wants to be seen as relatable, yet she asked for ceremonial hierarchy. She wants to be seen as modern, yet she insisted on an outdated display of royal supremacy. This is the contradiction that defines Meghan's entire media strategy. She wants Hollywood power, royal privilege, and public sympathy all at once. But what happens when you try to play three roles at the same time? You fail all three. And Meghan didn't see that. Not during planning. Not when she entered the building. Not even as things began to fall apart. Because inside her mind, this wasn't arrogance. It was validation. But validation at what cost? Was she expecting Fallon to kneel on national television? Was she imagining a viral clip of Jimmy Fallon bending one knee, bowing low, smiling up at her, and saying, "Your Royal Highness, welcome to the show"? Did she believe that would elevate her brand? Or did she want to send a message to the world? I am still royal, no matter what the palace says. The psychology here is crucial. Meghan has spent years insisting she rejected the royal system, that she walked away from the institution, that she wanted freedom. And yet, every public move she makes screams that she wants to keep the rank, keep the title, keep the symbolism, keep the superiority. Hollywood doesn't operate that way. Fallon's world doesn't operate that way. America doesn't operate that way. So imagine Meghan stepping into that green room, believing everything was going according to plan. Her glam team buzzing. Her publicist rehearsing talking points. Her assistant refreshing Twitter to see if anyone had caught wind of her appearance yet. She likely believed the curtsy demand hadn't caused any real friction. Because Meghan Markle has lived in a bubble for years, a bubble reinforced by stylists, assistants, PR managers, and friends who do not dare contradict her vision. But while Meghan was in her bubble, Fallon's team was in crisis mode. NBC executives, segment writers, stage managers, everyone was scrambling. Should they comply? Refuse? Compromise? Cancel the segment? Replace her with another guest? And as that panic brewed backstage, as producers whispered frantically in hallways, as Jimmy Fallon allegedly grew more irritated by the minute, Meghan smiled for her pre-interview photo shoot. Because in her mind, the comeback was already underway. This wasn't just a talk show appearance. It was her reclamation, her re-entry, her rebirth in the American spotlight. But the irony? This comeback moment wasn't the beginning of her return. It was the beginning of her downfall. Because after all the planning, all the strategy, all the delicate PR maneuvering, there was one force Meghan couldn't anticipate. Jimmy Fallon himself. The charming, lovable, goofy host who rarely pushes back. The celebrity who makes everyone comfortable. The man who avoids controversy like it's poison. He was about to do something Meghan never believed he would. He was about to say no. And that rejection? It wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. It was the moment Meghan's entire comeback machine crashed headfirst into a brick wall. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Because the real trouble began not when Meghan made the demand, but when Jimmy Fallon reacted to it. And what he did next changed everything. What happens when a joke becomes a demand? What happens when one of America's most beloved entertainers is expected to kneel, literally kneel, before a Hollywood duchess who abandoned the very monarchy that gave her the title in the first place? Because behind the laughter, behind the studio lights, behind the cameras, something jaw-dropping was happening at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Jimmy Fallon wasn't just preparing for another episode. He wasn't just memorizing cue cards or rehearsing punchlines. He was facing a demand so surreal, so wildly out of sync with his world, that for a few moments, he reportedly just stood there, stunned. She wants what? That was the first reaction, according to two anonymous NBC insiders who later leaked the story to an entertainment blog that had previously covered Meghan's infamous Oprah interview. She wants you to curtsy. On air. Like, actually curtsy. Let that sink in. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a Saturday Night Live sketch. This wasn't some ironic bit where Jimmy would do a goofy royal bow and the audience would laugh and Meghan would toss her head and wink at the camera. No, this was a real request. A formal, deliberate, serious demand issued by Meghan Markle's team to NBC staff, multiple hours before the taping. Now, context matters. In Meghan's mind, the request likely made sense. After all, she'd walked beside kings. She'd stood on palace balconies. She'd been photographed in royal carriages and signed correspondence with a duchess title. She wasn't a mere actress anymore, at least not in her own perception. So when she entered the Fallon orbit, she didn't come as just another celebrity guest. She came to remind the world who she was. And that meant, symbolically, ceremonially, dramatically, Jimmy Fallon would curtsy. But what's truly staggering is how seriously her team allegedly pushed this. According to behind-the-scenes chatter, Meghan's publicist first floated the idea to Fallon's segment producers as a fun moment. A quick nod to Meghan's royal status. A show of respect. A lighthearted opener, they said. But as producers laughed it off, Meghan's team reportedly pushed harder. We're serious. It's part of the entrance. Fallon's staff was dumbfounded. This was The Tonight Show, not Buckingham Palace. This was New York City, not Windsor Castle. Jimmy Fallon bows to no one. Not even Taylor Swift. And yet Meghan's team insisted. It's a mark of respect, they allegedly repeated. It acknowledges her position. One producer asked a brutally honest question. What position? Because here's the truth that Meghan seems to forget. America doesn't have monarchs. It has celebrities. And respect here isn't earned by birthright or protocol. It's earned by likability, authenticity, humility. 3 things Meghan's critics say she's rapidly losing. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter to her. She had a vision. And in that vision, Jimmy Fallon was lowering his head, bowing slightly, and curtsying on national television to a woman who once wore a tiara and now wore a narrative. And the contradiction? Meghan Markle left the royal family citing racism, isolation, and oppressive rules. She positioned herself as a feminist rebel, a truth teller, a breaker of tradition. So why was she now demanding a centuries-old gesture that literally symbolizes subjugation? Why was she invoking a royal tradition she claimed to detest? Simple. Because control feels like power, and power feels like safety. And in Hollywood, where attention is currency, a moment of forced reverence felt like a brand reset. But it backfired instantly. Jimmy Fallon, ever the diplomat, reportedly tried to laugh it off. According to someone in the writer's room, he thought it was part of a sketch. Like a Coming to America spoof, he asked. No, not a joke, one of his producers responded. They mean it. And that's when Jimmy reportedly went quiet. What followed was a tense meeting behind closed doors. Fallon, his executive producer, the segment coordinator, Meghan's reps. No cameras, no assistants. Just a brutal confrontation over optics, expectations, and egos. Meghan's team, according to leaks, doubled down again. She's a duchess. It's a moment of recognition. She expects to be treated accordingly. And Jimmy? He reportedly said just 7 words that ended the debate instantly. Then she's not going on the show. Boom. Silence. Meghan's team allegedly panicked. They'd flown stylists in from LA. They'd sent custom lighting instructions. Her makeup artist had already posted a teaser on Instagram. The paparazzi were camped outside. This wasn't just a no. This was a disaster. But Fallon didn't flinch. Because here's the part Meghan's team didn't calculate. Fallon didn't need her. He didn't need the ratings bump. He didn't need the PR win. He didn't need the controversy. In fact, he had more to lose by saying yes. Because if Fallon curtsied, what message would that send? That American media bows to disgruntled royals? That privilege trumps protocol? That comedy shows take orders from ex-royalty turned influencers? No. Jimmy Fallon said no because he had to. He said no because the audience would see through it. He said no because bowing to Meghan Markle on national television would have turned The Tonight Show into a palace sideshow. And so Meghan's moment vanished. Just like that. But it gets worse. According to a crew member who later posted anonymously on a Reddit AMA thread, Meghan reportedly reacted to Fallon's decision with quiet fury. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't throwing things. But her tone? Ice cold, the crew member wrote. She asked, "Does he not understand who I am?" That line, "Does he not understand who I am?" It's the line that echoed through the studio halls long after Meghan left. And here's the twist. It wasn't just Fallon's team who were disturbed by the request. Other guests that week reportedly heard about it and started gossiping. One comedian, scheduled to appear the day after Meghan, made a sarcastic joke in rehearsal. Should I curtsy too? Or just kiss the ring? It spread fast. Within hours, word had trickled up the chain at NBC. By the next day, according to insiders, the network had quietly blacklisted Meghan from rebooking the show in the near future. But the most humiliating part? Fallon didn't even talk about it publicly. He didn't shade her on air. He didn't leak the story himself. He just moved on. Because in Jimmy's world, the best punishment is being erased. And Meghan? She was erased. The segment was cut. The teaser removed. The promotional posts deleted. It was as if she had never been scheduled at all. But Meghan? She never forgets a slight. which is why her team went into overdrive trying to recover the narrative. Over the next 72 hours, subtle pro-Meghan stories began to appear across lifestyle outlets. Why Meghan Markle is reinventing herself on her own terms, read one. Meghan and Harry focus on parenting, not press, said another. A calculated flood of soft rebrand articles. But something felt off. The tone was too polished, too coordinated, too desperate, because the truth was already leaking. Fallon staffers, green room witnesses, guest coordinators, even lighting techs, they were all whispering the same thing. She wanted him to curtsy. And now, social media had caught wind. Twitter threads erupted. TikTok creators reenacted the scene. YouTube commentary channels lit up. The question wasn't whether she made the demand, it was why. Why would someone who claimed to flee royal oppression now demand royal obedience? Why would someone building a brand on freedom now cling to feudal hierarchy? And most importantly, what was she planning next? Because one thing was certain. Meghan Markle didn't see this as a loss. She saw it as a challenge. And she wasn't going to walk away quietly. In fact, she was about to make a phone call. One that would take the drama to an entirely new level. What happens when a woman walks into a room believing she's untouchable, only to realize the room doesn't care who she is? The moment Meghan Markle stepped into the green room at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, something was off. The vibe, the energy, the looks exchanged between staffers who had read the briefing notes. Something didn't fit. Something felt strained. But Meghan? She didn't see it. Or maybe she did, and chose not to acknowledge it. She walked in like a woman on a mission. Not nervous. Not humble. Not even pretending to be just another guest. No. Meghan entered with an aura of silent expectation. A vibe that said, "You will adjust to me." According to multiple accounts from staff and insiders present that day, the energy shifted the moment she arrived. Not in the usual celebrity way. Not the wow, she's really here excitement. It was something colder, sharper, more performative, like the arrival of someone who had memorized the steps of a coronation march. But forgotten that this was a comedy show, not a royal court. She walked in like she owned the building. One staffer reportedly said in a leaked Slack message that was later screen-grabbed and shared across entertainment forums. Didn't smile, didn't greet anyone. It was like she expected someone to announce her. And this wasn't Meghan's first green room. She knew how the game worked. A-list guests come and go all the time. George Clooney jokes with interns. Viola Davis hugs the makeup team. Even Michelle Obama brings donuts for the writers. But Meghan? Her entrance wasn't warm. It wasn't icy either. It was controlled, studied. Every hair in place. Every step deliberate. Every word filtered. She was dressed in what insiders described as a semi-royal glam look. A custom ensemble said to be created by an emerging designer she'd been quietly mentoring. Neutral tones. Flowing fabric. Not a trace of imperfection. And her team? A full entourage. Hair. Makeup. PR. Personal assistant. Security. All packed into a green room meant for 2 people, max. Fallon's team noticed instantly. The vibe was tense. The space, cramped. One production assistant attempted to offer Meghan a bottled water. She reportedly looked at the label, raised an eyebrow, and whispered something to her aide, who promptly handed it back. She didn't say thank you, the assistant later confided. She acted like it wasn't cold enough, or maybe it was the wrong brand. Either way, she barely acknowledged I was even there. Another red flag? The chair arrangement. Typically, the guest chooses where to sit. But Meghan's staff rearranged the entire seating layout without asking, pushing one chair to the far side of the room, pulling a table closer, adjusting the lighting by removing a lamp altogether. Lighting was too warm, one staffer explained. She wanted cool tones. Her makeup artist said it would bounce better on her highlighter. And that was just the beginning. The writers, Fallon's own segment team, came in to brief her on the general questions Jimmy would ask. Standard procedure. Lighthearted. Easy stuff. Topics like her favorite guilty pleasure, raising kids, any funny travel mishaps, upcoming projects. Nothing heavy. Nothing about the royals. A classic soft segment. But Meghan allegedly shut it down immediately. No personal questions, she reportedly said. Not, let's avoid certain topics. Not, I'd prefer to focus on the project. But a firm, outright denial. No personal questions. The writers were confused. Fallon doesn't do deep dive journalism. He's not grilling people on trauma or palace conspiracies. This was going to be surface-level fluff. Fun. Breezy. That's what the segment was designed for. But Meghan was already in defense mode. Because she didn't trust the room. Not the writers. Not the vibe. Not even Fallon himself, despite his decades-long reputation for being drama-verse. And that's when she asked about the cue cards. Will I see the questions in advance? The writers explained, politely, that Jimmy likes to flow naturally. That's how he gets those iconic spontaneous reactions. That's why celebrities love him. But Meghan wasn't like most celebrities. She didn't want spontaneity. She wanted scripting, control, precision. And when the writers left the green room, reportedly shaking their heads, they walked straight into Jimmy's prep room and told him, "This one's going to be complicated." Meanwhile, back in Meghan's suite, her stylist was triple-checking how her hair would look under the studio lights. She asked for the lighting director. She asked to preview her walk onto the stage. She asked what side Jimmy would sit on, left or right. Because she had a better angle and wanted to ensure the cameras captured it. All of this, while Fallon's team scrambled to maintain the illusion of a relaxed, friendly shoot. Then came the final straw. Meghan's PR representative pulled one of the segment producers aside and whispered the now infamous words. She's expecting the curtsy. Not a joke. Not part of a gag. Not a quirky surprise to go viral. An expectation. A requirement. Jimmy Fallon. An American citizen, television host, an unapologetic goofball, was expected to curtsy before Meghan Markle as she walked onto his stage. And the producers? They froze. You mean, as a joke? No, the rep responded. As a show of respect. Respect? Respect is earned. It isn't demanded in the form of a centuries-old gesture designed to signify royal hierarchy. Not here. Not in this studio. But for Meghan, this wasn't about history. This wasn't about England. This wasn't even about Jimmy Fallon. It was about control. Because Meghan was walking into an uncontrollable space. A late-night show, run by a man known for being unpredictable, unscripted, and above all, fair. And fair was the one thing Meghan's brand could no longer risk. So she tried to rig the rules. And that's when Jimmy entered the green room. Eyewitnesses say the moment he stepped inside, the temperature dropped. Not literally. Emotionally. He didn't smile. He didn't do the Fallon, "I'm your buddy" energy. He looked around the room, took in the scene, the entourage, the tension, the rearranged furniture, the dead lamp on the floor, and asked one simple question. Are we good? Meghan reportedly smiled and said yes. But Fallon didn't return the smile. He turned to his producer and said, "We need to talk." Now, the two men walked out. Meghan remained in the green room, unfazed, still smiling, still believing, perhaps, that her moment was just minutes away. But it wasn't, because in the hallway, Jimmy Fallon was fuming. He's never been like that, one staffer later said. He's the most easygoing guy in the business. But something about this just set him off. Fallon allegedly turned to his EP and said, "If I curtsy to her, I lose all credibility." That's not happening. The executive nodded. They both knew what had to be done. And so Jimmy walked back into the green room one last time. Not to apologize. Not to renegotiate. To end it. "You're not going on," he reportedly said. "We're not doing the segment." Meghan blinked. Her team froze. There was no yelling. No screaming. No slammed doors. Just silence. Pure, icy silence. And then Meghan stood up, straightened her outfit, and walked out of the green room with her head held high. Not a single word spoken. But as she exited the studio, a production assistant overheard her say something chilling to her aide. Make the call. Who was she calling? And more importantly, what was she about to set in motion? What happens when the warmest man in television turns cold? When the king of easygoing charm suddenly draws a hard, invisible line and refuses to move? Because Jimmy Fallon isn't known for confrontation. He isn't known for drama, for outbursts, or for taking a stand on much of anything. He's the host who laughs with everyone. He avoids politics, controversy, and conflict like it's the plague. But the moment Meghan Markle walked out of the building, after reportedly demanding a curtsy and subtly threatening the show's integrity, Jimmy Fallon was no longer smiling. And insiders say it was like watching a light switch flip. He was done. One senior segment producer would later confess. We've seen Jimmy frustrated before. We've seen him tired. But this was different. He wasn't angry. He was insulted. And Jimmy Fallon doesn't take kindly to being insulted in his own house. Let's rewind to that exact moment. Just seconds after Meghan exited the green room, head high, silence thick in the air. Her entourage shuffled out behind her, avoiding eye contact. No one said a word. Not to staff. Not to the assistant holding cue cards. Not to the lighting crew waiting near stage left. Just silence. As the door swung closed behind her, you could hear a pin drop inside the studio's inner hallway. Fallon stood still. He didn't sigh. He didn't crack a joke. He just looked at his executive producer, let out a slow exhale, and said, "Okay, let's fill the segment." No yelling. No finger pointing. No drama. But that silence, it was louder than anything. Because when Jimmy gets that quiet, people start to worry. The writers scrambled. They retooled the show order. A stand-in comedian bumped up. A musical guest got an extra song. Fallon's monologue was hastily edited to cut a pre-planned Meghan reference. And yet Fallon himself? Stone still. He walked slowly back to his dressing room, bypassing the snack table, ignoring two interns who tried to ask about mic checks. His phone was buzzing with texts from staffers, assistants, even a couple of producers at the Today Show who had already heard whispers of the Meghan incident. Because word was getting out fast. By the time Fallon sat down in front of his mirror, still in makeup, still in his crisp blazer, he turned to his showrunner and reportedly asked one thing. Why do they think I would ever do that? That question stuck with the team. Not just what Meghan demanded, but why she thought it would work. Why would she assume that Jimmy Fallon, a man who has hosted presidents, Oscar winners, and global icons, would perform an act of royal submission on live American television? She doesn't get it, one writer said quietly. She doesn't understand this world. And that was the core of it. Because Meghan's brand is rooted in status, titles, perception, control. She emerged from a monarchy that lives and dies by protocol, where gestures are symbolic, where everything means something. But Jimmy Fallon's world? It's built on laughter, relatability, the casual, unspoken agreement between host and audience that we're all the same here. And Meghan had just shattered that. She walked into Fallon's kingdom demanding deference. And in doing so, she committed the once and no guest ever should. She tried to change the rules of the room. You don't do that to Jimmy. You don't try to turn a comedy stage into a throne room. Because no matter how much sparkle Meghan brings, no matter how much press she controls, no matter how many magazine covers she's graced, Jimmy Fallon owns The Tonight Show. And the moment she tested that authority, he dropped the charm. Backstage, Fallon's team rallied fast. They replaced the Meghan segment with a pre-recorded sketch. They rerouted audience applause cues. Fallon himself even improvised a new joke in his opening monologue, riffing on sudden scheduling changes, with a half-smile that masked the tension. But even as he joked, something had shifted. He didn't talk to anyone during the break. A camera operator shared anonymously. He usually chats, tosses a football, sings. Not that night. He was focused, tight, cold. And the writers? They were fuming. Not just because of the wasted time or rearranged schedule, but because of what Meghan's demand implied. She didn't just disrespect Jimmy, one of them said later. She disrespected the entire team. Like our work didn't matter. Like we were just props in her performance. It wasn't just arrogant, it was offensive. One writer described it this way. She treated us like palace staff, not professionals. That line hit hard. Because in Meghan's rush to maintain royal stature, she forgot something crucial. She wasn't in the palace anymore. And Fallon? He wasn't about to bend the knee. Now here's where it gets darker. The fallout wasn't just internal. By the next morning, NBC had already convened a quiet internal debrief. Not an emergency meeting, but close. Network execs were briefed on what had happened. Legal teams were alerted, just in case Meghan's team tried to spin the story or threaten litigation over canceled segments. But Fallon's camp? They were prepared. Everything had been documented. Every email, every text, every segment draft, every note about Meghan's requests, from her arrival time to her seating preferences to that infamous Curtsy directive. They weren't just covering Jimmy. They were protecting the show. Because this wasn't just about a guest walking out. This was about a media icon standing up. Fallon's reputation matters to NBC. His show represents a legacy. From Johnny Carson to Jay Leno to Jimmy Fallon, The Tonight Show is sacred territory in late-night culture. And Meghan's demand? It threatened to turn that legacy into a circus. But Jimmy shut it down. Quietly, firmly, without fanfare. And yet, even after she left, the story wasn't over. Because while Jimmy stayed silent, Meghan's team did not. Within 24 hours, her PR reps were working phones, quietly nudging entertainment writers, whispering that the Fallon cancellation was a scheduling mix-up, that Meghan had a family emergency, that it was never confirmed she'd appear. But the leaks were already spreading. Blogs, forums, tweets from late-night insiders. A now-deleted Instagram story from one of Fallon's hair stylists simply read, "Phew, some guests bring joy, others bring drama. No name, no details, but everyone knew who she meant." And Jimmy? He said nothing. Not a tweet, not a joke, not a reference, nothing. But his silence? It was the response. Because Fallon didn't need to explain. The story was writing itself. And Meghan? She was scrambling. Because for the first time in years, she couldn't spin the optics fast enough. She couldn't pivot. She couldn't distract. She couldn't cry racism or victimhood or trauma. Not this time. This time, the only thing she had left was the phone. And that call she made as she exited the studio? It wasn't to Harry. It wasn't to her agent. It wasn't to Netflix. It was to someone else. Someone with media power. Someone who owed her a favor. And the second they picked up, everything began to escalate. What happens when silence becomes strategy? When a phone call made in fury lights the fuse of a behind-the-scenes confrontation so intense, so chilling, that it leaves even hardened TV executives shaking their heads. Because that call Meghan Markle made as she exited NBC studios wasn't a surrender. It was a declaration of war. She didn't call to apologize. She didn't call to de-escalate. She didn't even call to explain. She called to retaliate. And the person on the other end of that call? A major player in Hollywood media. A fixer. Someone known for brokering delicate PR damage control deals, spinning even the ugliest celebrity headlines into sympathy-soaked stories, redirecting narratives like a magician pulling the strings behind the curtain. Let's just say this wasn't their first rodeo. According to a source familiar with the situation, Meghan's voice was ice-cold on that call. No rage. No tears. Just clipped precision. "Fallon humiliated me," she allegedly said. "And it needs to be handled. Handled. Not clarified. Not talked through. Not resolved. Handled." That one word sent a shiver through everyone who later heard about the call. Because it confirmed what many had long suspected about Meghan's modus operandi. When things don't go her way, she doesn't walk away. She plots. So what happened next wasn't just a reaction. It was a campaign. Within hours of that call, behind closed doors, Meghan's damage control machine was in full swing. Not with press releases, not with tweets, but with carefully worded whispers, quiet nudges, anonymous tips to gossip columnists, controlled leaks to online outlets willing to trade favorable stories for clicks, and most dangerously of all, a veiled threat directed back at Fallon himself. Yes, according to two separate sources within NBC, Meghan's camp allegedly implied that if the real reason for her segment's cancellation were to leak, they would respond in kind. By leaking private correspondence, production notes, or internal comments that could be spun as disrespectful, discriminatory, or misogynistic. In other words, if you expose us, we'll expose you. It was a chess move, calculated, high stakes, and laced with the kind of legal language that walks the razor's edge between implication and intimidation. But here's the twist. NBC didn't blink. Fallon didn't flinch, because they had something Meghan didn't. Receipts. Every interaction was documented. Every production meeting recorded. Every segment request, every wardrobe demand, every call sheet revision. All saved, all time-stamped, all ready to be used if Meghan's team made good on their threat. And more than that, Fallon had something even more powerful. Loyalty. His staff trusted him. Writers, producers, camera operators. They weren't just employees. They were his people, and they were furious on his behalf. She tried to weaponize kindness, one longtime producer reportedly said. She thought Fallon's easygoing nature meant she could steamroll him. But instead, Meghan ran headfirst into a wall of quiet resistance. A resistance that wouldn't shout, wouldn't tweet, wouldn't leak, but would stand its ground. Now let's rewind to the moment everything truly boiled over, the private confrontation. Because before Meghan walked out, before Fallon made the final decision to cancel her segment, there was one last attempt at compromise. A private, off-the-record conversation between Jimmy and Meghan. No assistants, no publicists, no cameras, just the two of them, in a corner room tucked behind the green room corridor, soundproofed, dimly lit, and designed for last-minute creative rewrites. Witnesses say they were in that room for just under 10 minutes. But what happened inside shook everyone who heard about it. According to one insider, Jimmy opened the conversation gently. "I just want to make sure we're on the same page," he reportedly said. "We love having you. But there's some confusion around the segment expectations." Meghan didn't smile. She didn't banter. She didn't joke. She went straight to the point. "I've made my expectations clear," she allegedly said. "This is a royal protocol issue. It's not personal." Jimmy reportedly blinked. "But we're a comedy show," he replied. "This isn't Buckingham Palace." And that's when Meghan delivered the line that would become infamous within NBC circles. "You don't have to believe in the protocol. You just have to respect it." Fallon, caught off guard, leaned back in his chair. He folded his arms. "I respect people," he reportedly said. "Not hierarchies." That line, devastating. Because it wasn't just a rejection of her request. It was a rejection of the persona she was clinging to. Meghan, in that moment, wasn't asking as a guest. She was demanding as a duchess. And Fallon? He wasn't buying it. The silence in the room reportedly stretched for several seconds. And then Meghan said something that changed everything. "If you don't do this, you'll regret it," she allegedly whispered. A threat? A prediction? A warning? No one knows exactly what tone she used. Accounts differ, but the message was clear. Play by my rules, or suffer the consequences. And Jimmy? He stood up. "I think we're done here," he said, and walked out. That was it. The segment was pulled. The staff was notified. The green room was cleared. And Meghan? She called the fixer. But the most chilling part? Within 30 minutes of that confrontation, a tip appeared on a celebrity gossip blog known for running blind items. Big-name host clashes with female guest backstage. She threatens to expose bias behind the scenes. Was the segment cut because of ego, or something more? Anonymous. Vague. But loaded with implication. And while no names were mentioned, the timing was suspicious. The wording too precise. The narrative too aligned with Meghan's past defense strategies. It was the first shot fired in what many began calling the Curtsy War. But Fallon still didn't speak. He let the rumors swirl. He let the speculation build. Because behind closed doors, his team was preparing for something bigger. A line in the sand. And just when it seemed like the drama might fade, just when it looked like both sides might quietly walk away, an unexpected figure re-entered the conversation. A palace insider. One who had been quietly monitoring the situation. And their response would flip everything upside down. Who does Meghan Markle call when her Hollywood illusion begins to crack? When the walls close in? When Jimmy Fallon, a man loved by millions, trusted across generations, and practically synonymous with harmless late-night fun, rejects her demand and shuts down her moment? Who does she turn to when she realizes she can't spin this alone? Because that's exactly what happened after her confrontation with Fallon. She didn't leave 30 Rock defeated. She didn't crumble. She didn't panic. She mobilized. That phone call, the one she made right outside the service exit, the one overheard by a trembling intern who later described her voice as controlled fire, wasn't to a friend or a relative or even to Harry. It was to her secret weapon, her Hollywood back channel, a power broker who operates in the shadows. Someone who has built careers, destroyed scandals, buried stories, and rewritten narratives for some of the biggest names in the industry. Meghan knew exactly who to call. Because this wasn't her first media crisis. And every crisis she survived has involved the same type of person. A fixer, not a publicist, not a lawyer, not a strategist. A fixer. Someone whose entire job is to make inconvenient stories disappear and inconvenient people irrelevant. And Meghan had one on speed dial. When the call connected, the fixer reportedly didn't even greet her. They simply said, "What did you do now?" Because they already knew something was wrong. Meghan doesn't call unless she's backed into a corner. And when a woman who thrives on image control suddenly loses it, she becomes unpredictable. The fixer asked for details. Meghan explained, her voice measured, calm, almost rehearsed. Jimmy Fallon refused to show her respect. He dismissed her. He humiliated her by canceling the segment. He undermined her public work. But what Meghan didn't mention, at least not according to the source who later leaked the conversation, was the curtsy demand itself. She didn't mention protocol. She didn't mention hierarchy. She left out the crucial detail that Fallon didn't humiliate her. She humiliated herself. And now she wanted backup. The fixer didn't waste time. They laid out the steps with brutal clarity. Step 1, control the narrative. Step 2, shift the blame. Step 3, create confusion. Step 4, pressure the studio. Meghan agreed. But there was a problem. Fallon was too big to manipulate. Too beloved. Too mainstream. He wasn't some small-time host trying to climb the ladder. He was the ladder. So the fixer changed tactics. We won't attack him, they said. We'll surround him. Surround him. Meaning, flood the press with alternative stories. Influence bloggers and gossip sites. Seed rumors about a scheduling conflict. Claim Meghan was called away. Say she was double-booked. Hint, subtly, quietly, that Fallon's show wasn't the safest space for her. Not outright accusations. Just vibrations. Just enough to create the impression of impropriety without saying it outright. This is the art of narrative warfare. No punching, just nudging. But that wasn't all. The fixer had a second tactic. One Meghan had used before. Weaponized victimhood. Not the blatant kind. Not the melodramatic kind. The subtle kind. The kind that floats into the discourse without ever being traced back to her. A whisper about emotional safety. A hint about misunderstood intentions. A suggestion of cultural insensitivity. It's the strategy that saved her during the Oprah backlash, the Spotify fallout, even the Netflix PR stumbles. And the fixer thought it would work again. But Fallon's team was prepared. Because while Meghan was activating her Hollywood back channel, Fallon was already in a closed-room debrief with his own inner circle. His showrunner. His executive producer. NBC's legal liaison. No jokes. No laughter. No easing the tension. Just a tight, focused, clinical recap of exactly what had happened. Fallon wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He was resolute. He kept saying the same thing. A writer leaked later. He said, I'm not bowing to anyone. Not in my studio. It wasn't about Meghan. It wasn't about royalty. It was about principle. Jimmy Fallon is goofy, yes. Silly, yes. But spineless? Never. And Meghan's fixer had severely underestimated that. Meanwhile, Meghan was back in her SUV, rolling through Manhattan traffic, staring out the window with an expression witnesses described as betrayed royalty. Her team was silent. They knew better than to speak. Except for one, her PR director, who asked gently, Do you want to salvage the relationship with the show? Meghan didn't blink. There is no relationship, she said. Not anymore. That line would come back to haunt her. Now let's talk about what happened next, the escalation. Because the fixer didn't just make one call. They made several. First, to a magazine editor who owed them a favor. Next, to a gossip columnist who thrives on inside Hollywood tension. Then, to a major entertainment outlet that frequently publishes Meghan-friendly content. Within hours, the media landscape began to shift. Headlines like, Meghan Markle's surprise cancellation leaves fans confused. Scheduling mishap or emergency. Meghan backs out last minute. Insider says Meghan Markle was treated unfairly before show tapings. A-list Duchess walks out after disagreement with producers. Notice the pattern? Ambiguous. Sympathetic. Suggestive. All pointing the finger, but gently. The fixer's fingerprints were everywhere. But something unexpected happened. Fallon's staff didn't stay silent. They didn't leak details to smear Meghan. They leaked details to protect Fallon. A writer anonymously posted. Fallon wasn't the disrespectful one. A producer tweeted, and then deleted. She wanted something Jimmy could not give. A technician posted on Reddit. Protocol? On Fallon? That's not how this works. And slowly, painfully, the truth began to poke through the fog. But Meghan didn't stop. She activated the final stage of her back-channel strategy. The escalation threat. A message delivered to NBC. If this story gets twisted, we will release our own version. Translation? If you tell the truth, we will twist it. But here's where everything broke. Because NBC had already briefed the palace. Yes, the palace. Not out of loyalty to Meghan. Out of necessity. And their response was devastating. And it would change the trajectory of this entire situation in a way Meghan never anticipated. What happens when a moment crosses the line? When tension turns into decision? When Jimmy Fallon, Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Let's Laugh It Off, Mr. America's Friendly Comedian, finally says the words no one believed he was capable of saying? Get her out of my studio. That sentence marked the point of no return. Because up until that moment, everything happening inside 30 Rockefeller Plaza was salvageable. A misunderstanding could be walked back. A demand could be softened. An ego could be soothed. A miscommunication could be smoothed over with humor and charm. But the moment Fallon uttered those 6 words, everything changed. This wasn't improvisation. This wasn't irritation. This wasn't a joke. This was a command. But before we get to that moment, before we replay the tension-packed seconds that led to Meghan Markle being physically escorted from one of America's most iconic studios, we have to rewind just a bit. Because this confrontation wasn't just about a curtsy. It wasn't just about protocol. It wasn't just about ego. It was about control. Whose studio was this? Whose stage was this? Whose rules mattered? Fallon's? Or Meghan's? And the answer was about to become painfully clear. Let's return to the scene. Jimmy Fallon had just walked out of the tense, icy confrontation with Meghan in the private meeting room, a room normally used for laughter-filled brainstorming, not royal protocol standoffs. His face was set, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. He wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional. He was resolute. Something inside him had snapped. Because Fallon isn't a man who picks fights, but he knows when someone crosses a line. And Meghan? She hadn't just crossed it. She'd bulldozed it. Demanding he curtsy? That was bad enough. Threatening consequences for refusing? That was intolerable. But insinuating, in that quiet, cutting tone, that he would regret not complying? That was the moment Jimmy Fallon changed. As Meghan walked back into the green room after the confrontation, visibly annoyed, her team scrambled. They sensed the atmosphere shifting. They sensed that something had slipped out of their hands. Aides whispered. Makeup artists froze mid-brush stroke. Her stylist tried to occupy her attention with a wardrobe adjustment that clearly wasn't necessary. Everyone could feel the storm building. Then a knock. Not a polite tap. A firm, final, unwavering knock. Fallon's executive producer entered. No smile. No warmth. Just business. We're canceling the segment. Meghan blinked. What? She asked, though she understood perfectly. It's not happening, the EP repeated. You can gather your things. Security will escort you out. Silence. A cold, electric silence. Her team looked like statues, frozen, wide-eyed, waiting for Meghan's reaction. And Meghan? She stood up slowly, her expression stiffening into something between shock, pride, and indignation. This is unacceptable, she said sharply. Jimmy and I have not resolved this. The producer didn't waver. It's been resolved. Those 3 words hit like a hammer. Meghan's face tightened. Her publicist stepped forward. We need to have a conversation with your PR department. This is highly irregular. We booked this weeks in advance. But the EP shook his head. There will be no further discussion. The decision is final. Another blow. Meghan inhaled sharply, her voice lowering into that controlled tone she uses when she wants to sound powerful. I don't think you understand who you're speaking to. The EP didn't blink. We understand perfectly. And we're done. If Meghan was expecting remorse, she miscalculated. If she was expecting fear, she miscalculated. If she was expecting the staff to crumble under pressure, she miscalculated again. Because the staff wasn't cowering. They weren't tiptoeing. They weren't apologizing. They were united. Behind Fallon. Completely. This wasn't a Duchess versus producer moment. This was Meghan versus an entire institution moment. And she had no idea. Her assistant quickly shoved her things into a designer tote bag. Her stylist tugged at the garment bag. Her PR rep whispered something panicked into her ear. But Meghan wasn't listening. She marched toward the hallway, straight toward Fallon's private prep room. Security saw where she was headed and stepped into place. Ma'am, one of the guards said carefully. This way, please. She recoiled. I'm speaking to Jimmy. No, ma'am, the guard repeated. You're not. A seismic shift. No one had ever spoken to her like that in years. And then, the door to Fallon's room opened. Jimmy stepped out. But this wasn't the Jimmy the world knows. This wasn't the silly, smiling comedian. This wasn't the charming Fallon who high-fives audience members. This was a man pushed too far. His voice was low but firm. "This isn't happening," he said. She straightened her shoulders. "Jimmy, you're making a mistake." He cut her off. "No, you made the mistake." The hallway went silent. "I don't bow to anyone," Fallon said. "Not here. Not ever." Her jaw clenched. "You disrespected me," she hissed. He shook his head. "No, I refuse to play along with something ridiculous." Meghan took a step forward. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." "No," he countered. "You did that when you demanded a curtsy." Her face hardened. "That's not what was said." Jimmy's expression sharpened. "We have your team's emails. We know exactly what was said, and we're not doing this." The words felt like slaps. Her team hovered in the background, helpless. PR tried to make eye contact with Fallon. It didn't work. His showrunner stepped forward as backup. Security tightened their formation. Meghan's breath hitched. "You don't understand who I am," she said again, quieter this time. More desperate, more revealing. Fallon's eyes didn't soften. "I understand exactly who you are," he said. "And that's why you're leaving." Boom. The hallway exploded into motion. Security moved gently but firmly. Meghan's entourage scrambled behind her. Her assistant tried to shield her from bystanders who had gathered, but it was too late. Everyone was watching. Everyone had seen. Everyone would talk. She was escorted down the corridor, past the sound booth, past the lighting rig, past studio interns whispering behind clipboards. They didn't shove her. They didn't manhandle her. But the symbolism was brutal. The Duchess of Sussex, escorted out of America's most watched late-night show. Not welcomed. Not celebrated. Not honored. Escorted out. One staffer later described it as the most surreal moment of my entire career. Another said, "It felt like watching the end of a reign." And Meghan? She kept her chin high, kept her stride steady, kept her breathing controlled. But inside, she was burning. Because humiliation is Meghan Markle's greatest trigger. She can handle criticism. She can handle gossip. She can handle press. But humiliation? That is her breaking point. When she stepped outside into the cold Manhattan air, paparazzi lenses were already shining in her direction. Not because they knew anything had happened, but because they were expecting a glamorous exit shot for social media. What they captured instead? A woman who had just been dethroned. Metaphorically, symbolically, strategically. But this moment wasn't the end. Not even close. Because Meghan's humiliation wasn't the story. What she did after being thrown out. That was the real shock. Because within 24 hours, Meghan Markle unleashed a PR retaliation so aggressive, so targeted, so calculated that even seasoned media insiders were stunned. But before any of that hit, something happened inside the Tonight Show control room. A moment no one expected. A moment that made everything far worse for Meghan. And it came from Jimmy Fallon himself.